Following the release of Half-Life 2, Valve wanted to start experimenting with the concept of episodic gaming. This started with the announcement of Half-Life 2 Aftermath, a full-length follow-up title to Half-Life 2. This was done for many reasons. However, shortly after the game's announcement, Valve made the decision to rename Aftermath to Episode 1 and announce a trilogy of Aftermaths to complete the story arc set in motion by Half-Life 2. Following the release of Episode 1 in 2006 and the acclaim it received from both fans and critics, Valve became enamored of the episodic gaming concept and not only continued on with their own trilogy, but started asking third-party dev studios to make spin-off Half-Life 2 episodes of their own. At first, Junction Point, Monolith, Gearbox, and EA Montreal were asked to submit pitches for spin-offs, with Junction Point, a studio headed by Deus Ex veteran Warren Spector, pitching a humorous take on the rebels escaping Ravenholm in the events following Half-Life 2. This game, being an entire video's worth of information, was shelved less than a year into development due to Junction Point forming a relationship with Disney and the then-to-be-created Epic Mickey. This episode's concept, being a return to Ravenholm following the events of Half-Life 2, was pitched to Arkane Studios, based out of Lyon, France, a company which at that point had only shipped 2 titles, Arx Fatalis and Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, the latter being created in Valve's own Source Engine. Valve was confident in Arkane's abilities to use the Source Engine toolsets, and their working relationship grew quickly.
And it's exciting that a designer as respected and talented as Raphael is finally going to have a chance to take it to the next level. Raphael and his team at Arkane have been great to work with. They understand the technical issues, they understand how to take the capabilities represented by the Source Engine and use them to build really exciting and innovative gameplay. It's that insight into how to take technology and turn it into something that's exciting and meaningful a gamer that really has distinguished their team.
Even if the term relationship is being used quite lightly, as Valve is well known for not communicating much with third parties, regardless of the development stage of their own IP. Arkane's take on Ravenholm had nothing to do with the previous Junction Point iteration of this project, and instead was a far more serious take on the concept, with many functions and mechanics taken directly out of their own previous games. However, it was never meant to be, and the project was quietly canceled nearly 2 years into development. Before we get to that, I'd like to give a shout out to today's sponsor, The Ridge. The Ridge Wallet. The Ridge Wallet is a tiny, sleek, metal wallet money clip combination that protects you from people from stealing that wallet, pulls down on the bulge of keeping a normal fold, trifold, disgusting thing. Yeah, thank you Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this video and sending me one of them. Seriously, honest to God, they sent me one and I've been using it ever since, and then I switched back over to a normal wallet, hated it, and I've been using this one. Check out the link in the description below and use promo code VNN to get a discount on a future purchase of your very own Ridge Wallet. The game, as the prototype name suggests, took place in the trap-filled and zombie-infested town of Ravenholm, taking place at the same time as the events of Half-Life 2's week-long jump during the slow teleport between Nova Prospekt and Dr. Kleiner's lab. The player, being Corporal Adrian Shepard, the protagonist of the acclaimed Gearbox-produced expansion pack to Half-Life, Opposing Force, is placed in one of the laboratories of Father Gragori, the crazed monk-turned-gunman from Half-Life 2. Gragori states that the placement of Adrian was an answer to a prayer that he had previously made in order to field backup and support of a mission of dire importance. Shepard was placed by the G-Men, who had previously put the Corporal in stasis after the defeat of Race X in Black Mesa, and following a speculated monologue by the G-Man himself, was set loose in what is communicated later to the player as a massive condemned hospital in the outskirts of Ravenholm. Gragori, following the events of Half-Life 2 and the sudden surge of new Xen-infested flora and fauna, began experimenting on a serum to inoculate oneself from the said Xen infestation, keeping a person from being transformed into the types of zombies Gordon Freeman had to face on his way back to the coast. Now, while he claims to have figured a way out to vaccinate himself, done through the extraction of blood of headcrabs mixed with a variety of other organic substances, Gragori has had many trials and errors before reaching this speculated point. The hospital the player finds themselves in is infested with the medical failures of Gragori, including zombies of a different breed, completely lacking a host such as a headcrab, and instead are independently infected, inferred to be a plague of Gragori's own doing, along with a wide variety of primate guinea pigs that have grown in strength, even with a severe weakness to light. Gragori explains to the player that they must get a radio relay operational in order to transmit a message to an unnamed organization in relation to his discovery of the Zen vaccine of sorts, which sends Shepard through the two massive wings of the hospital. The one wing, built first, is stylized around the 1960s, likely the point it was most operational. The other wing, built much later, is stylized around the 1980s and 90s, and the player must get through the entire hospital in order to repair and activate electrical sources to help transmit Gragori's message and later escape Ravenholm altogether. Shepard first explores major parts of this hospital alone until meeting back with Gragori in a courtyard of sorts, who then spends the majority of the episode traveling together, a la Gordon and Alex in episode 1. However, nearing the end of the campaign, the player learns that Gragori's serum failed and in fact had possibly infected him to begin with. Gragori attempts to hide this from the player by starting to wear a large cloak over his head and body without explanation. The game ends with Corporal Shepard fighting and killing Gragori, who had succumbed to the Zen plague so badly that he quickly became grotesque and malformed. The G-Man then plucks Shepard following the defeat, lamenting the fallen monk, and the credits roll. Now, the mechanics the player sees throughout this episode are far different than anything previously seen in a Valve-created Half-Life experience, such as the player being given an in-depth melee system. First of all, right-click on the mouse does not correlate to a secondary fire mode on any weapon. Instead, it's a secondary punch. Similar to the attack seen in Left 4 Dead, however with a significant power increase, this punch attack would knock smaller enemies back and sometimes even stagger them or even push them over ledges and cliffs. Another melee attack, being a kick, is almost identical to the kick seen in Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. This attack would have a similar effect to the punch, however, significantly stronger, killing some smaller enemies. Now, the new weapons given to the player, along with returning weapons, need to be redesigned to not have a secondary fire. So, with that in mind, the new weapons given to the player include a nail gun. This is a simple manual fire nail gun with uses attributed to it through the emergent systems seen throughout the game world. This game would not only deal significant damage, but it would also be used to solve electrical puzzles based around nails being used as nodes to carry electrical signals throughout the world. These signals would be used to open doors, activate electrical appliances, or even set traps for unsuspecting enemies. Later in the game, the player would receive an electric ball shotgun. This weapon would have to be charged with electricity seen throughout the world and would fire a massive electric ball, dealing severe damage to anyone in its path and automatically activating things without the need for nails and nodes. This gun does not reload, however, and would only fire the charges that it holds at the present time. The player would also be given a leaf blower jumper, a purely physical-based weapon. The leaf blower would blow enemies and items backwards with incredible force. However, only for a short period of time, as the blower could only hold so much power. The blower could be faced downwards as well, and used as a painless rocket jumper. A nail grenade, which was a grenade the player could prime, throw, and when detonated, sent an explosion of electrified nails in all directions, activating any objects in the area, as well as pinning and also electrocuting any NPCs around. The enemies the players would face include hostless zombies, far more intelligent than the zombies Half-Life players are used to at this point, as they still held sight. These zombies could pull doors off their hinges, break through walls others couldn't, and overall were a significantly larger threat to the players than anything seen prior. Players also faced bruiser zombies. Think of the Charger from Left 4 Dead 2. The bruiser is a behemoth zombie that can hurl massive objects at the player, as well as completely incapacitate them through a wide range of available attacks. This zombie can also spit acid at the player, which can pool on the ground and cause damage when touched. Remember, this was a full year before Left 4 Dead 1 launched. And lastly, players would fight corrupted primates, a set of monkeys that were tested on by Gragori, and through failed experiments were given heightened intelligence and strength. They almost always travel to attack in packs and use the cover of darkness to their advantage, initially presented to the player through a series of creepy instances and situations. The monkeys are deadly, but with a weakness. If a player shines a flashlight directly at their faces, they would momentarily back off. However, they combat this weakness by attacking from all sides, limiting the effectiveness of any light source. And then, of course, the game would end with a Father Gragori boss fight, Gragori being so grotesque due to the many Zen fighting serums that he injected himself with, all failing and turning him into a Zen monstrosity. The game also featured emergent systems based based around objects that a player would expect to see within a hospital setting, such as ceiling fans being able to be pulled down, activated, and then used as a spinning blade trap, like those seen in Half-Life 2. The absorption meter. With a large focus of electricity in this game, the player had a specific amount that they could absorb before officially taking damage. The absorption meter would quickly deplete when in any area of electric activity, and once depleted, would start to damage the player. Movie screens. At one point in the game, the player could activate a film projector, showing a movie on the screen opposite that projector. The NPCs in the room will then become distracted through the duration of the film. Interestingly enough, the film is a machinima of sorts created in-house by Arkane. Vending machines are very mechanically similar to nail wall traps seen in Might and Magic. If an enemy is pushed back into these, they would be physically harmed by the broken glass and electrocuted by the many electronics seen within inside, and most likely killed. Now, the nail gun itself could actually be used on enemies and pin down limbs to surfaces temporarily. However, the zombies would, through a dynamic animation system not previously seen in a Source Engine title, pull their limbs off of that surface after a short period of time. And lastly, puddles are incredibly powerful. If a puddle of water is connected to a power source, it would disintegrate any enemy that passes through it. Now, how do we know the majority of this information? How am I gathering this much information? It came from an interview that I did with Danny O'Dwyer. Danny recently visited Arkane Lyon and Arkane Austin and was given a chance to play through the majority of this canceled Half-Life episode and recorded the whole thing. I talked to Danny about this and he explained the whole experience. Significantly more information than that was covered in the documentary itself.
Yeah, so you wake up at the start. I think it's Unwelcome Company, but I think they spelled Unwelcome wrong. When you start. So the Gragori stuff there was all one recorded. So there is actually a different voice for Gragori in a different part of the game, but I think it's a third-party placeholder. I think it's a different person. So you start in that area, the zombies all come in. He basically opens a hatch that you go down into and he fights them off, kind of like the end of Ravenholm, right? Where he fights them off and you, I wonder if I'll see him again. You go downstairs, that's where there's all the dark areas where you're interacting with the first zombie I think I kill is the guy who bursts through that door and like you kick him into the spikes.
Oh, okay.
I think he might be the first one. So that with the underwater area where they have I kick the guy over the handrail. So you basically walk out a door, you meet him, he walks you out to that courtyard through the little door there, which is where he explains that there's the east wing and west wing of this building. So he talks to you, basically that's the place where he says, look, we're trying to turn these generators on, it's going to send a signal out or something. It's very vague. Then you go in, then that's when I smash through the window to go to where that chair is with the electrical socket, where that's the first electrical puzzle you beat, and then the zombies come down the hall and they turn to dust. That section is predominantly you with the pistol and then getting the whatever they called it, like a bolt gun or something. I don't think they had a final name for it. The one that shoots the bolts. There's a couple of puzzles. There's basically like a million puzzles that are all really fun. Like they nailed this whole section where you're opening doors by tagging getting the electrical sockets to turn on. There's lots of places where there's like puddles of water. There's areas where there's zombies. They've clearly set it up so you're supposed to get them. There's areas where they have these spinning fans. You meet so that's that whole area. There's a little bit of an outdoor area, which is where I shot it's my favorite bit of gameplay in the whole thing, when I walk up the steps in the outdoor courtyard and the zombie starts getting up beside the spinny thing and you shoot the bolt so it connects the spinny trap with the thing. And it's just like, that's pure that to me is like, that could be a moment in any Half-Life game. Yeah, you go up the side of that building, but at some stage after that, you get the big gun, which they didn't have a name for either. It's basically like a plasma launcher. There's no right click in this whole thing because you're just using it melee. So if you just stand near something, it charges up those balls, and those balls like destroy the zombies if you hit them directly with it. I'm not sure if I put any of that gameplay in. At some stage you end up going downstairs, and that's where you find the monkeys, the apes. There's a guy with a flashlight with that opening attacked by them. And then I'd say there's like 3 or 4 set pieces with them. There's a lot of like horror games, sort of they show themselves and run away, and maybe you find one of them and you kill it, and it escalates to the part where I showed where I'm trying to open the door up and they're jumping in. It's kind of bright in that area. They pick up the stuff, pick up the kids' toys and throw them. And then you go into the downstairs area, and that's where there's a puzzle where there's basically an electrical lake that you have to turn off the electricity to get past. but in so doing, those monkeys don't come out if it's bright. So if they don't come out if it's bright, and if you shine the lamp in front of them, they'll back off. But when you do that, another one flanks you. So you're constantly it's basically whack-a-mole with those guys. And then they'll jump into a thing and come out somewhere else. That's where the second piece of unbroken gameplay that we put in. After the bit where I cut, I basically shot a bunch of monkeys and then crossed the lake. And then when you get to the other side of the lake, after that, I think is when I was in the grey boxy area. You go outside briefly. He said there's supposed to be a vehicle here that would bring you to another section, but they hadn't made the vehicle. They hadn't made the transport part for any of that. So it was basically just like a hack to get to the next level. The last part that I played is think about a section in Half-Life, maybe one of the ones where you're picking up turrets and putting them places. One of those parts where there's something going on that you're just fighting back waves of things. So there's an area where, I think, did you see where Gragori's going up in the cherry picker? Is that what you called him here? So he's going up on one of those, and you have there's basically like an area that you're playing in. There's some gameplay of this in it. Zombies are coming in. You have turrets, but they're not the Half-Life 2 turrets. They're like a different type of thing, and you're turning on their power by connecting them with the bolts. And then also there's a couple of those areas are like steel walkways, which are also,
oh my god,
they also go up. So there's a bit of gameplay of that in there. So you're basically going around filling up your electricity gun, your plasma thing, over on this wall, and then using it to turn on various things. I also think you turn on his cherry picker as part of that. Like you have to like give him some juice and then go over here and then juice this thing up, and then take your gun out and shoot them. And then eventually he opens up a door and you guys meet on the other side. And I think that's when we wrapped on. So that was an encounter that was clearly finished, but like a decent chunk before it hadn't really been finished. But it was still like, you're talking like some of these levels were like, felt like they were 80% done. Some of the levels that I played felt like they were fully done, except for they definitely wanted to like tweak animations and audio and stuff like that. Like there was placeholders. So, But when you're playing this game, it feels like,
You don't know. You can't tell. Yeah.
No, you have no idea. Yeah, you're in the moment, right?
I'm going to stop Danny right there. Valve released the orange box and burned themselves out completely on Half-Life. Following a company-wide prototyping fair, they began work on what became Portal 2, Time, Left 4 Dead 2, and continued maintenance on Team Fortress 2, and then canceled Episode 3 in 2008. And following, pulled the plug on every Half-Life title in production altogether, all at once. At least 4 different Half-Life games died that one day. Arkane, catching wind of the cancellation, spent 2 weeks working 24 hours to put together a pitch build of the experience to allow Valve to keep the project alive. Reportedly, most of Valve didn't even look at this build and canceled the game anyways. Arkane states that they, to this day, were never told by Valve why the project was killed, and some assume that it was just about money. Here's the thing, Valve had already experienced a large influx of cash from Steam. They only canceled these projects out of boredom, not business. That's bullshit. So what now? Well, it's so old now that I really don't see a purpose why they couldn't just release this unfinished build and let the community do what they want with it. There's a lot of love and care put into this. According to Danny, this is the project that everybody talks about still, to this day. And if you watch the NOCLIP documentary, they seem to be more attached to this canceled project than some of the games they've released. This was a big mistake on Valve's part, a mistake that they have admitted to following the release of Half-Life Alyx. And now that Valve has broken their own Half-Life curse, I don't see a reason why they can't allow the community to experience, at least partially, some of these unexplored areas, unreleased episodes, and love and care put into this IP that we could have seen if Valve was maybe a bit more organized. I want to send a huge thank you to Danny from NOCLIP for allowing me to talk to him about his experience in this unreleased Half-Life game and just all around being a super friendly dude. Seriously, man, thank you. This video would not have been possible without you. If you want to be able to talk to me about any of the topics that I cover on this channel or any topic at all, my DMs on Twitter and Discord are always open. Links to those down in the description below. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to support this channel, I have a Patreon page, and also I'm selling some merch. It should be right below this video. I'm selling a missing texture mask. People seem to like it. Selling a speculation shirt. People seem to like that. Selling an error sticker. People seem to like this for some reason. And thank you very much for watching. I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Valve News Network. Have a good day. Adios.